Tipp FM investigates. Funded by the News Reporting Scheme. Disability in Tipperary.
Disability rights are human rights, and when they aren't available to us and when they aren't being protected, then we are being failed and let down.
That is Dean Buckley from Tipperary DPO explaining the importance of advocacy for people with disabilities, which DPO aims to support. The Disabled Persons Organisation have recently set up in Tipperary. The organisation set up in October and elected their committee last month. Today we are joined by Dean Buckley and Cillian Dunne from Tipperary DPO. Dean, for anyone who doesn't know, what is DPO?
DPOs are a relatively new concept in Ireland. Disabled Persons Organisation, it seems very basic, but historically a lot of disability advocacy has been done by service providers or has been done through parents or carers, and disabled people ourselves have often been kind of sidelined in our own struggle. DPOs are about creating groups for disabled people, but also the other thing that has been sort of an impediment to disability activism is that traditionally we're fragmented among our disabilities. So like there's groups advocating for blind people and groups advocating for deaf people, and there's group advocating for wheelchair users. DPOs are cross impairment and bring together people with all kinds of disabilities so that we can advocate on disability rights, participate in decision making, but also connect and find community with each other and pool our knowledge and learn from each other and work together to elevate each other's voices.
And why is it important to have something like DPO in Tipperary?
Well, it's a cross-impairment thing, and it is just about bringing disabled people of all different kinds of disability together, especially because, for example, myself, my disability is idiopathic hypersomnia. It's a rare sleep disorder that effectively means I don't get refreshed by sleep. I'm sleepy and exhausted all the time, and I need to take medicine to stay awake. For me, there has never been a natural place before for me to even go to engage in disability activism because I'm not a wheelchair user. I don't have sensory impairments. Tipperary DPO, by just being cross impairment, created like a space where I could connect with other disabled people, which is really important to me, but also just to have a natural home to speak up for disabled people and to speak up for myself too.
Yeah, and Cillian, what gaps is DPO filling? What were the challenges beforehand that DPO have helped with or have the potential to help with?
So I think they're really important because we need to be able to have our voices heard in all kind of areas. So whether that be accessibility or, in my case, getting a new wheelchair, things like that. Ireland is definitely improving when it comes to inclusion and stuff, but there is still a long way to go compared to other countries. But I think having something like the DPO where we can have that option to have our voices heard in decision-making rooms can really make an impact.
And what are some issues DPO would like to focus on, and what are the priorities?
Accessibility is a lot more complex than we often give it credit for. Like, we tend to think of it purely in terms of physical accessibility for people with mobility impairments, which is obviously crucial, but accessibility also means something different to every disabled person. So like, how navigable is a service or a physical space for deaf people or for people with visual impairments? How easy is it to access a service, any kind of government service, not just for disability related service, but like for people with cognitive or intellectual disabilities? So accessibility audits of TIP are a big priority for us, but we want to make sure that it comes from that cross impairment perspective.
In your opinion, what are some changes that need to be made around Tipperary?
I mean, I'd love to see more accessible housing and more access to housing in TIP, because while it's there, there's still long lists and it's very hard to even get access to them. So I'd love to see more of that. And I know like Minister Alan Kelly's gotten stuff in Nina recently for housing, so hopefully some of them could be made available. I'd love to see improvements in more inclusion in the workplace.
What do you think employers are like in Tipperary when it comes to people with disabilities looking for jobs?
I think in my own case in Nina, I've worked in retail for a while and I was very lucky. Like, my manager at the time was very inclusive. I just think there needs to be more kind of advocacy for other businesses to do the same, because we want an inclusive world. We want to be able to come into a shop and see a deaf person, a person in a wheelchair, like as well as people with invisible disabilities as well. Like, it needs to be pushed to be even more inclusive than we are, because while we're going great at the moment with it, it can always be improved. You have organisations like Employability that will help disabled people get work, and I think improving programs like that would help to improve the numbers as well, because strength in numbers like everything, but when we have the likes of people with disabilities working with employability and organisations such, it's improves the voice of those people, and so it gives them a better chance of getting in.
Like, yeah, in terms of employment, like I think I would really like to see stronger employment protections for disabled people, because right now, like, it is technically illegal to discriminate against disabled people in hiring, but it is functionally unenforceable because the employer would basically have to come out and say out loud, I'm not hiring you because of your disability. Obviously, it is really important to change attitudes and to make people want to include us, but at the same time, the burden can't be entirely on disabled people to basically almost beg for our own place in society. Like, there needs to be some level of support and protection from like the government and the state to actually enforce those rights.
Do you think there's enough support from government?
No.
What could they do right now to support more?
Abolish means testing on disability benefits so that there's no disincentive to start working. Apart from like the financial disincentive, just like the hassle and complexity is a barrier in itself, especially for people with cognitive or intellectual disabilities who need extra support navigating that system. I think the number that always comes back to me is that in Ireland we have 2 bands of income tax, but there are 96 bands of means testing for disability benefiting. It's just a huge barrier. It's not just employment too, it also affects like decisions about whether your disabled people could get married. Like our spouse's incomes are going to affect our means testing. The maximum rate of disability allowance annualizes to less than the poverty line in this country. Already disability allowance maintains people in poverty, and then if people want to try and lift themselves out of that through work, the means testing is just this massive barrier. The solution to like the question of what about people who have a lot of money or whatever and still claim disability allowance is to like claw that back on the tax end, not to create this barrier at the receipt end.
And so what are some other challenges that may be affecting DPO members or the general public?
Through the public system, we don't have adult assessment for autism or ADHD.
And if someone can't get a diagnosis, how could that affect them?
Well, I think that self-knowledge piece is very underrated, like the ability to just understand your own experience of reality on a moment-to-moment basis. But also, especially for people in work, getting accommodations generally requires some bit of documentation. But I do think that even where you don't need accommodations necessarily, that the effect, the impact of self-knowledge on your ability to handle the challenges that do come with neurodivergence, it can't be understated.
Mm. And what is the accessibility like for not just diagnosis, but appointments in general?
Tipperary, the north-south divide, we're in 2 different HSE areas, which can create difficulties, especially for people in the border areas, but also because we're at this outer edge of both those areas. A lot of those services necessarily in Tipperary themselves.
Like we'll say wheelchair services and stuff like that, I was sent to Limerick. That's just the nearest.
From my perspective, there's also through the HSE, a lot of specialist medical services are just located in cities. For example, my condition, it's through a sleep and respiratory clinic in the Mercy in Cork. And until recently, they didn't do online like teleconferencing consultations, or they wouldn't do anything over the phone. So for me to go to the Mercy is a whole day affair on public transport. I'm leaving my house at like 9 a.m. and then I'm getting back like by 7 p.m. There are still a lot of services where there's still no over the phone or Zoom sort of consultation. Like even if the public transport was amazing, or even if you have private transport, having to go all the way to the city from any rural area just for a medical appointment is a big hassle.
Yeah, and for those travelling to appointments, what is the transport like across Tipperary?
One of the biggest things that has come up again and again as we're talking about the issues in Tip is transport, and public transport in particular, because the connectivity is not good, especially between the north and south of the county. And when you are relying on public transport, you're already bound by schedules, but then schedules aren't met And there have been improvements. Local Link is great. All the Local Link buses have wheelchair ramps and are accessible, but there's still huge connectivity issues. And like we're still, for example, waiting on the Clonmel to Turles to Nina bus that there was a public consultation for it in 2024, and we're still waiting to hear anything about it.
Mm-hmm. And this issue, are you communicating with anyone? Are you talking to councillors? How supportive are local authorities?
The next step is reaching out to get involved and to start connecting. We've joined the PPN, and we're represented in the North Tip Disability Forum. This was set up through our vice chair, Derek Spate.
And for the previously mentioned challenges, how are you approaching this, or what is DPO doing?
I think we start with connecting with council officials and the PPN and looking about like getting into different committees. But I think it's also really important that we sort of get those accessibility audits done, because there's no point going into the room if we haven't figured out exactly what we need to advocate for.
And lastly, for anyone who wants to support change and help DPO, or if they need help, what can they do and how can they contact you?
Get in touch with us in the DPO or contact our local councillors as well, who will also be networking with us, and we'll bring up the issues as best we can and try and make a change.
Yeah, Tipperary DPO is open to anyone over the age of 18 with lived experience of disability in Tipperary, and anyone who wants to support us. We have a Facebook page so far. If you could give us a like on that and share what we post, just to get the word out, because right now it's really about building the group, and we'd love to get more people involved, especially because of that. Again, in terms of the accessibility audits, we really want to have a comprehensive and cross-impairment approach, presenting as broad a range of disabled voices as possible. We don't want to be at all doom and gloom about the situation for disabled people in Ireland. There have been a lot of positive changes in our lifetimes, and there's been a big shift away from institutionalization to supporting disabled people living in their communities, from seeing disability as a purely medical issue to seeing it as just a part of human life, and towards a greater role for disabled people in the running of groups that advocate for us, and also in the running of services, but that at the same time none of that is happening fast enough. And we're still way too reliant on charities to provide services that the state should be providing.
That is all we have time for today. Thank you, Dean and Cillian, for talking to us. Back to you in the studio, Fran.
Tipp FM investigates. Funded by the News Reporting Scheme. Disability in Tipperary.